Next month, we'll get to see a couple of DC's most iconic heroes in a whole new light. Joining me to tease what's in store in the HBO original series Lanterns, co-creators and executive producers Tom King and Damon Lindelof. What's up, guys? Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
What an absolute pleasure, man. I'm a big IGN fan.
I get the sense you guys have done a few Comic-Cons. Lanterns this is introducing a couple of Green Lanterns to the DCU, and it's doing it. You've got, they're known for being intergalactic space cops, basically, and you've got them solving a small-town murder mystery. Why was that the right way to kind of put them into the DCU?
They are very much still space cops, but I think that the idea of where do we want the audience to experience their first case, because Earth is a part of the broader galactic system, etc. But I think most human beings are familiar with other human beings. So before you kind of get big and crazy, which the show, no spoilers, but does, because there's a big broad galaxy out there, we wanted to kind of start with something a little bit more familiar. And Tom, shortly before I came on, sat in a room with James Gunn and Peter Safran and a number of other comic book and movie and television luminaries, and it was his idea to basically say, what if you did Green Lanterns as a buddy cop, true detective kind of setup, and everybody leaned in because that just felt like a different way to do it. It was certainly exciting to me.
Now, Tom, you're in the DCU writers' room, basically. You're kind of part of architecting this whole thing. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, James Gunn and involvement? And you just did Supergirl, and now you're doing this, which is very drastically different in aesthetics and tone and scope, from what I can tell. Did Gunn give you any particular boundaries set? Are there lines that you can color within? Where there's any sort of suggestion of which way to take it? Or
part of James's genius is his ability to have trust and faith and to hire the right people. I mean, the guy is one of the great casters of all time, and I don't just mean that for the actors he picks, which are just amazing, from Chris Pratt to Millie, but the idea that he's like, I have Damon Lindelof on the show, one of the great writers of all time, let him cook. and that's been his philosophy. Of course, he's there for every scene. He's there to make everything better. But he's also there because his philosophy was always superheroes are not one thing. Mm-hmm. Because an audience they've had this for 25 years. If we keep giving them the same thing over and over again, it kind of just becomes slop after a while. Mm-hmm. And James is like, no, I want to show them that superheroes can be a 9 o'clock HBO show, that you can have that risk and that prestige in a show. And they can also be a huge space adventure, and they can also be a very heartwarming, beautiful journey of Superman on this planet. That they can be all of those things. That's James's vision, and it's wonderful executing it.
Now, Green Lantern hasn't had quite the best track record kind of engaging with mainstream audiences compared to some of the other DC characters. And there's, we've seen Batman a million different ways, and the point where you're like, okay, how do you reinvent him again? Green Lantern, I guess, how are you balancing getting that core mythos right for the hardcore fans, but also introducing the characters to people who maybe aren't familiar with that lore? What's the key thing about the Green Lantern core that you really want to establish in here?
I think there's a lot of trial and error. I mean, the great thing about our writers' room was it was comprised of people who were super duper familiar with the lore and the comics and the legacy, like Tom, and then there's Chris Mundy, who was running the show, who ran Ozark, who is much more familiar with sort of the crime genre, and then tonally we're basically having the conversation around the questions that you just asked, which is what feels like it's too much, what feels like it's not enough. But ultimately we always kind of coalesced around this idea of these characters are people that exist outside of what the rings that they wear on their fingers, and we have to get that part right. We have to understand how they came to be who they are and what they want, and is there a way to tell Hal and Jon's origin story that is canonical, that is to say there are certain rules that you should not and do not want to break, but also find space to explore new areas. And then you cast someone like Kyle Chandler or Aaron Pierre, and they're bringing their whole lived experience to the thing. And so I know that it sounds reductive to say we just want audiences to care about the characters, but if you watch the show and you can feel our love for Hal and Jon, then the show's going to work. And it doesn't matter what the constructs are or what the plot is or whether the Guardians or Sinestro are in it. The only thing that matters is whether or not you care.
Now, there's another Lantern popping in there we didn't mention, which is Guy Gardner. One of the top comments on the trailer is he looks like when you have a custom character in a video game and they pop up in a cutscene. How are you striking that balance between this this grounded True Detective experience and then having Nathan Fillion as this over the top goofball? How do you find that tonal sweet spot without it being totally jarring?
First off, I should just say I made that comment, and I stand by it.
Okay,
I'm just saying. No. Please, Tom, take it away.
I mean, one thing to lean on is Nathan is a fantastic actor who can adjust to situations, but the thing to really lean on is the source material. Guy Gardner in the comics, he is a little bit more elevated, a little bit more goofy, and he has always, since in the last 40 years, been that guy in the comics, since the McGuire Giffen run, of the guy who's just a little bit up. So to me, it feels very true to the history of these characters, and it also gives a balance to where those three people are and how they interact with sort of superheroes. And to me, it's a wonderful glance on how three different heroes handle the same power set and deal with the world. It's cool.
Yeah, and I'll also say Guy is introduced in James's Superman film, and he's the Green Lantern, and so our show basically had to accommodate that. We wanted all of the projects to be talking to one another and not sort of siloed off in their own storylines, and so it was important for us to feel Guy and explain what role Hal and Jon have in the overarching sort of narrative of how many rings are there, who has the rings, who's looking over this particular sector, et cetera, et cetera. I'll just say there's more Nathan than a cutscene. We got our Nathan's worth.
Yeah. And that's the wonderful thing about Superman is that it was like a hidden mystery. Is why does Guy have the ring that we get to that we solve?
Now, Tom, your background is predominantly in comics, and you've done a lot of comics work, and now you're doing TV, you're doing live action. With comics, you can put virtually anything on the page that you can imagine. With live action, you've got logistical issues, you've got VFX budget, you've got stuff like that. There are limitations. What do those present to you that are like a fun challenge rather than a constraint?
I mean, first of all, there are limitations in comics. Comics are a drawn medium, so if I'm like, I want 50 lanterns on the page, then I've just told my artist, say like Mitch Garrett's, I've just told him, okay, you can't leave the house for a month and go with your kids. So like my limitations, whenever I'm writing a comic, I'm like, oh, I don't want to screw over my best friend by saying that. So it's not that different. But I didn't find it, I found it to be almost the opposite. There was not limitations. Like in comics, it's wonderful. We can use music, we can use needle drops, we can use the incredible performance of Aaron and Kyle to enhance all of it. If anything, I found it the opposite. I mean, this show was, sky has no limits. Let's do what's best for these characters and best for the show.
When did you know that you wanted Kyle and Aaron? Like, in terms of sort of ideating the general core of the show, when did you have them in mind?
I think a big part of it was figuring out how old Hal Jordan was going to be in our introduction to him. I think that there was a part of us that was like, okay, we're getting the first crack at Hal Jordan inside the DCU as a prestige HBO drama. Shouldn't we just be doing young Hal, in much the same way that, around the same era as the Ryan Reynolds film. But once it became clear, I think by virtue of Tom's pitch, that it was going to be a sort of part Training Day, part buddy cop thing, that it was about a passing of the baton, we started to think, wouldn't it be interesting if Hal didn't want to let go of the baton, but he's running the relay race nonetheless. And I think that there was just something kind of working through the culture around the old guard not wanting to be replaced.
Damon, this is not your first time taking a beloved comic book and turning it into an HBO series. Watchmen is phenomenal. To be honest, going into that, I was like, this isn't going to work. And then coming out of it, I was like, oh, yeah, that worked. What was some takeaway you had from working on Watchmen that you've been able to apply here?
I mean, I think that the short-term takeaway is that you're always learning and that you have to have humility about the thing. And I think that there's an act of hubris. That is to say, when something is perfect and you love it as much as I loved and thought Watchmen was perfect, the audacity of saying, like, why not me? I have something to say about this too. And like every morning I would wake up sort of under the crushing weight of, oh my God, what was I thinking? But I do think like when you reconnect to the love, and in the case of Watchmen, I think like there's this thing that basically predated you and exists, and all these people love, and we're entering into this era, or we've been in it for quite some time, where the fans of a thing, when we were kids going to comic book stores, buying and consuming this stuff, now we're making it. And I think coming into Lanterns, it was just such a relief that Chris was running it, but Tom and I also have a really great passion and affiliation and connection to these characters, but also this kind of of sense that we were under really strong guidance. And then there were several other writers in the room, a different range of sort of like comic book knowledge, but they were really approaching this as how do we make a great show about Green Lanterns, and you know, we hope it worked. You never know until it's out there. We like it.
Nice. Now the trailer, you've got a title with no green in it. You've got more green in the newer trailer. People are stoked about that, getting some color in there. There's a lot of mention of fear. A lot of talk about fear. Is there any chance there's maybe like another color lantern that somehow relates to fear? Anything you can say about that?
Yeah, I can't wait to be dragged for saying that it's not yellow enough. The show's not yellow enough. The green, the yellow, they're the black and white of the Lanterns universe. They're oppositional forces. All I can say is stay tuned, and I think I'd say we would be irresponsible if we didn't at least contemplate working some yellow magic in there, but no guarantees.
Now, watching the trailer, you know, it's always like, I hate when trailers spoil the entire thing, and I think a lot of people sort of want to know what they're signing up for. And with a show, that's a little bit different from a movie because there's a lot more ground to cover. You kind of alluded to there being bigger, more spectacular things, you know, waiting in the deep end. Is that a fair assessment to say the trailers haven't really shown us much?
We're dropping a much more extensive trailer in the very near future, and hopefully that will scratch the itch that you are describing. I will just say, and I think that I speak for Tom on this, and certainly Chris, we are in your camp. We don't want the trailers to give everything away, but we also understand that if you're proud of the work, you should show what you did. So we're striking the balance, and I think that there's a little more scale coming your way with the next piece of material.
Well, thank you both so much. This was a treat. I'm intrigued. I want to see more.
Okay.
You can find out a whole lot more about Lanterns by watching it for yourself, the old-fashioned way about finding out about things, which you can do when it premieres August 16th on HBO and HBO Max. But right now, there's more Comic-Con on the way right here on IGN.